So picture this. If a massive earthquake hits, a towering mountain of solid rock is going to fracture, right? It'll just splinter and crumble into pieces.
Right, it shatters.
Exactly. But a simple puddle of water sitting on that exact same mountain, it just ripples, it absorbs the shock, reshapes itself, and is, perfectly fine.
It's completely unbothered.
Yeah. And why is that? Well, according to the text we're looking at today, it's because the water intuitively knows how to change its frequency.
Which is a pretty wild concept when you start applying it to human beings.
It really is. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a text that claims this single rule of physics doesn't just explain why water survives earthquakes. It explains who you naturally become friends with.
Yeah, or why you despise certain foods.
Right. And ultimately, it claims this might determine whether the human race survives the next century.
I mean, it sounds like a science fiction novel, honestly. But it's actually deeply rooted in this ancient way of looking at the mechanics of the universe and then applying it straight to our modern anxieties. Basically, the claim is that literally everything is just frequency.
Everything. So we're pulling this from an essay by an author named Shuseng. It's titled, Unite with Heaven, Resonate at the Same Frequency.
A very ambitious title.
Very. And our mission for this deep dive is to trace the author's incredibly unique intellectual journey here, because we're starting with the hard physics of vibration and then moving into honestly, a pretty unsparing critique of modern human psychology.
Well, absolutely. Our addiction to comfort gets called out hard.
Yeah, it does. And then we're finishing with this massive cosmic call to action regarding the spiritual fate of humanity.
But before we jump into the deep end of this text, it's important to lay out how we're going to approach this for you, the listener, because Yufeng's essay builds towards some very strong philosophical and spiritual claims.
Yeah, including a call for a unified global belief system, right?
Exactly. And as your guides on this deep dive, we aren't here to endorse these viewpoints, nor are we here to debunk them. Our goal is strictly to impartially unpack the framework.
Right, we're just messengers.
Exactly. Think of it as trying on a very unique pair of philosophical glasses. We want you to see the world through this particular lens for the next few minutes, just so you can fully understand the underlying logic of the ideas being presented.
Okay, let's unpack this. If water's ability to absorb vibration is the ultimate survival tool in physics, how does this author build an entire worldview out of that?
Well, the essay starts with a physics lesson. That's the foundation for literally everything else. The core premise is that as long as there is motion, there's vibration. And where there's vibration, you have frequency.
And frequency creates rhythm.
Right. Which leads to the cardinal rule of this universe, according to the author, which is that things that share the same frequency resonate with each other.
They boost each other.
Exactly. They mutually enhance one another. But conversely, things with different frequencies will suppress, clash with, or even entirely destroy each other.
Okay, so how does that work mechanically?
If we look at the underlying mechanism, it all comes down to how kinetic energy is processed. Like when two sound waves of the identical frequency meet, their peaks and valleys align, and the amplitude actually doubles.
So they literally grow stronger together.
Yeah. But if the frequencies are misaligned, they flatten each other out. It's a process in physics called destructive interference.
Destructive interference.
Right.
Which brings us back to the mountain and the puddle from the intro.
Yes, the classic hard versus soft.
Because the essay sets up this dichotomy between hard and soft that completely flips our traditional understanding of strength. I mean, we usually associate strength with being solid, right? Like we say stand your ground or be an immovable mountain.
Yeah, strong as a rock.
Exactly. But the author is arguing that hard things are actually the most vulnerable things in this physical universe.
What's fascinating here is how the author grounds that vulnerability in structural rigidity. Let's look at the atomic level of that mountain.
Okay.
Rocks have a rigid, fixed lattice structure. So when a massive external vibration hits like an earthquake, that kinetic energy has absolutely nowhere to go.
Because it can't bend.
Right? The atomic bonds can't flex to accommodate the new frequency. So the kinetic energy simply snaps the bonds apart. The rock shatters.
Well, the puddle just sits there.
Yeah, because water molecules are loosely bonded. They just slide past one another. I mean, you can hit water with a hammer, put it in a blender, or hit it with seismic waves, and it just absorbs the energy. It adopts the new frequency.
Like flows.
It flows. And the author equates this physical softness with the highest possible form of biological adaptability.
But wait, I have a bit of pushback here. If we apply this to human behavior, right? If we're supposed to be completely soft and just conform to whatever container or, frequency we were placed in, don't we lose our moral backbone?
That's a really good question.
Like, if you find yourself in a toxic workplace or an oppressive political regime, shouldn't you be a rock and resist it? Because if you just adapt to the toxic frequency, aren't you becoming part of the problem?
Yeah, that is a very natural pushback. But we really have to separate ideological conformity from structural resilience here.
Okay, how so?
In the context of this essay, being soft doesn't mean agreeing with a toxic environment. It means possessing the adaptability to navigate it without being destroyed by it.
Oh, I see. So it's purely about survival.
Exactly. Biological evolution shows us that life forms that cannot adapt to massive environmental shifts, whether we're talking about bacteria, plants, animals, or humans, they face extinction. Rigidity, even righteous rigidity, makes you a target for the kinetic energy of a changing universe.
It actually reminds me of the technology inside a pair of noise-canceling headphones.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right, because they don't protect your ears by building a massive, thick wall of plastic to block out the noise, like a rigid rock. That would be super bulky, and honestly, it would fail.
Yeah, it wouldn't work very well.
Instead, the headphones listen to the chaotic environment. They measure the exact frequency of like an airplane engine or a loud train, and they instantly emit a soft, perfectly inverted frequency.
They match it to cancel it.
Exactly. They survive the noise by dynamically matching it, neutralizing the chaos without, being shattered by it.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The headphones are engaging in active, dynamic adaptation. And that is exactly what the author is prescribing for biological life. You aren't building a wall. You are neutralizing the clash by adjusting your own output.
Okay, so if dynamic adaptation is the goal, how does our human biology try to mimic that puddle of water or those headphones in the real world? Because the text moves from abstract physics straight into some very specific human experiences here.
It does. The author points out that the universe is governed by macro and micro rhythms. Like Halley's Comet operates on a 76-year frequency. Earth orbits the sun every 365 days.
The moon dictates the tides on a 29.5-day cycle.
Right. And then zooming in, we have seasonal changes, migratory patterns of birds, our wake and sleep cycles, down to a human heart beating 60 times a minute.
So we're essentially just walking bundles of biological frequencies.
Exactly. We are embedded in this much larger cosmic symphony.
And when our internal bundle of frequencies clashes with the external environment, the result is physical suffering.
Yes.
I mean, the essay uses jet lag as a primary example. When you step off an airplane in a drastically different time zone, your internal sequence is completely inverted from the local rhythm.
And you feel terrible.
Right. You get brain fog, exhaustion, physical illness. The author also mentions altitude sickness, or how someone moving from the north of a country to the south might find it physically distressing to eat the local diet.
The underlying mechanism there is biological friction. Your circadian rhythm is governed by chemical responses to light frequencies. So when you suddenly demand that your biology operate on a northern rhythm in a southern environment, your cells are literally experiencing that destructive interference we talked about earlier.
They're clashing.
Yeah, the frequencies are clashing, which flattens your energy.
Wow. And the essay doesn't even stop at physical biology. It takes this frequency concept and stretches it over human sociology, too.
This is where it gets very observant about human nature.
Yeah, the author points out that despite living in this globally connected world, human beings constantly self-segregate into small, stable circles. Like, we naturally gravitate toward people whose customs are similar to our own.
The text highlights specific demographics here, like expats living abroad. It notes the tendency for Indian expats to form communities with other Indians, or Chinese expats to associate predominantly with other Chinese people.
It even drills down to the micro level of a university campus.
Yeah, observing that students who hail from the exact same home province will naturally form tight-knit cliques. They'll bypass thousands of other peers just to find their specific group.
And the fascinating claim here is that the author strips away all the usual psychological explanations for this.
No shared interests, no conscious bias.
Right. They argue this unconscious self-segregation isn't about shared intellectual interests or, conscious prejudice. It is purely biological frequency matching.
It's entirely depersonalized.
Yes. The essay claims that the reason you like or dislike a person has absolutely nothing to do with their personality. If you like them, your frequencies resonate. If you dislike them, your frequencies clash. Period.
And if we look at the cognitive science behind that claim, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the human brain is essentially a prediction machine.
Right.
It constantly wants to know what is going to happen next so it can keep you safe.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when you are immersed in a foreign culture, surrounded by different languages, social cues, and customs, your brain is burning massive amounts of caloric energy trying to predict a clashing environment. It is exhausting.
So you're just constantly experiencing cognitive destructive interference.
Exactly. But by seeking out people from your exact same home province, your brain suddenly knows all the rules. The cognitive load drops to near zero. Your internal frequency matches the external environment perfectly, and the brain rewards you with a feeling of comfort and belonging.
So the author visualizes this human dynamic using the analogy of a large symphony orchestra. For the orchestra to play harmonious music, every single instrument has to be tuned to the exact same pitch.
Right.
If the violins stubbornly refuse to tune to the oboe, the result is just chaotic noise. So what does this all mean? Is the author suggesting we literally have to tune our minds to match our neighbors just to get along?
That is the direct implication, yes. To function effectively within any group, a person must actively tune their mental frequency to match the collective.
Wow.
Because if you insist on adhering to your own internal frequency while the rest of the orchestra changes the pitch, you are creating destructive interference. The author argues that without this active tuning, there's no resonance, which means no harmony. And without harmony, peaceful coexistence is impossible.
So the rigid individual is basically heading towards self-elimination, which honestly sets up a very uncomfortable mirror for modern society. Because if we are supposed to be like water, easily adjusting our frequency to our surroundings, what happens when we demand that the environment adjust to us instead?
And that's where the tone of the essay really shifts.
Right. The essay pivots here into a scathing critique of what the author sees as a modern fragility epidemic.
The critique begins with a series of extreme thought experiments designed to test the reader's baseline adaptability. The author asks you, suppose the sun suddenly rose in the west.
Okay, pretty extreme.
Right. What if hospitals vanish tomorrow? Suppose all transportation and communication networks suddenly cease to exist. Could you cope?
And the implied answer is that modern humans would completely shatter like that rock.
We would not survive.
To ground this in reality, the author lists several anecdotes of modern inflexibility, and these are pretty striking. There's a story about fellow travelers from the author's home country who stubbornly refuse to eat Western food because it slightly upsets their stomachs, so they choose hunger over adaptation. Total rigidity.
Yeah. Then there's a 30-year-old man who, after only 6 months working abroad, breaks down crying bitterly because he misses his home. And there is a friend who is constantly miserable because he simply cannot stand the smell of foreigners.
But the most revealing anecdote, hands down, is about a colleague of the author who was living in Zimbabwe.
Oh my gosh, this one is wild.
It really is. This colleague felt, quote-unquote, oppressed by the abundance of trees and lush vegetation.
Oppressed by trees.
Yes, they actually stated they preferred the barren Gobi Desert of Jayuguan Pass back home, simply because the lack of trees offered a broad, open view.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the psychological rigidity required to feel oppressed by a forest is just staggering.
It's almost unbelievable.
Right. That person's internal frequency was so stubbornly tuned to a barren desert landscape that the simple presence of leaves and vegetation caused them actual emotional distress. They were completely unable to adjust their internal dial to enjoy a new, lush environment.
And the author uses these stories to build a larger argument about the trap of comfort. The essay states that modern humans could not survive the lives our ancestors lived just 2,000 years ago.
Oh, definitely not.
We curse when the tap water runs dry. We complain when the buses are late. We grumble when the power goes out. And we become deeply irritated without air conditioning.
Which is true.
Right. The paradox the author is pointing out is that the more technologically comfortable our lives become, the more biologically and emotionally fragile we become.
I do have to challenge this premise, though, because,
Yeah.
is the author genuinely arguing that having air conditioning or wanting clean tap water is a sign of weakness?
It sounds like it initially.
Right, because most historians and scientists would argue that, not dying of cholera from contaminated water is a triumph of human progress, not a symptom of fragility. It feels like the author is just romanticizing suffering here.
That is a vital distinction to make, and we need to look closely at how the author defined these terms. Because the author isn't arguing that tap water or air conditioning are inherently evil.
Okay.
The critique is really about the difference between being soft and being fragile.
Right, back to the physics.
Exactly. Think back to the water versus the rock. Softness, like water, means you can totally enjoy the air conditioning when it's running. But if the power grid fails, you flow around the obstacle.
Adapt.
Yes. You sweat, you find shade, you adapt your frequency to the heat, and you survive. Fragility is entirely different. Fragility is like a sheet of glass.
Okay, a sheet of glass.
It might look strong, and it functions perfectly in its preferred temperature-controlled environment. But the moment that preferred environment is disrupted, the moment the AC breaks, the glass doesn't adapt. It shatters.
Wow.
The text is very explicit here, stating, softness can adapt to various frequencies, but fragility leads only to death.
That is heavy. And if you're listening to this right now and feeling a serious case of mental whiplash, going from a guy who hates trees in Zimbabwe to the literal concept of death and survival, you aren't alone.
It escalates very quickly.
It really does. But this is exactly how the author's philosophy functions. To Stefeng, the micro and the macro aren't just related. They are the exact same mechanism operating at different scales.
Which brings us to the final and definitely most intense section of this deep dive.
Yeah. The author takes this critique of human fragility and scales it all the way up to a massive cosmic imperative.
The essay introduces the concept of the unity of heaven and humanity. The text also refers to this as heaven-human holography.
Holography, like a hologram.
Yes, in holography, every single small piece of the hologram contains the entire image of the whole. So the idea is that the frequency of the universe is directly mirrored in the frequency of the individual.
Which sounds highly mystical, but the author actually grounds it in blunt practicality.
Very blunt.
Yeah. They argue that unity with heaven doesn't mean sitting on a mountain meditating. It means practically adapting to the changes of the universe. The analogy they use is weather. If it rains, crying won't keep you dry. If it snows, shouting at the blizzard is useless. We cannot expect heaven or the universe to conform to human desires. Humans must align with the will of heaven.
The author insists we have to resonate with the changes in the Tao. And for those unfamiliar, in this philosophical context, the Tao refers to the fundamental underlying current or rhythm of the universe.
It's the ultimate frequency.
Exactly.
That's it.
And the author issues a severe warning here. The stars are awakening. Consciousness must change, and the very frequency of the heavens is shifting right now.
And this is where the scope of the text just wildly expands into a spiritual call to action. The essay asserts that to survive this incoming cosmic frequency shift, people must enter something called Lifechanyuan.
Right. And to clarify that term, based on the author's broader writings, Lifechanyuan represents a sort of conceptual spiritual oasis.
Okay.
It's a proposed new way of communal living and thinking designed specifically to match this new cosmic frequency. The author further claims that to adapt to the trend of the times, all religions must eventually unify into one uniform belief system.
That is a massive pivot. How are we supposed to synthesize all this?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, within the author's framework, everything is connected by that one rule. The exact same physical rule that dictates how kinetic energy shatters a rigid rock is the exact same spiritual rule the author believes will destroy a rigid human consciousness if it doesn't align with the changing Tao.
So failing to adapt is fatal on every level.
Yes. The consequence of failing to tune to this new frequency is laid out incredibly starkly. The author writes that if we refuse to change the frequency of our minds, the fate of the dinosaurs serves as a warning.
The dinosaur. So we're talking about a literal extinction-level threat attached to this physics concept of frequency matching.
Yes. From atomic bonds to jet lag, from university cliques to the extinction of the dinosaurs, everything is bound by the exact same mechanism of resonance. The essay closes with the urgent imagery that the gate to heaven is as narrow as a seam, and humanity must follow the guide without looking left or right.
Wow. It really forces you to step back and reevaluate your own relationship with change, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
I mean, we traced a line from the simple physics of vibration and the softness of a puddle, all the way to why expats stick together to lower their cognitive load.
We saw how an addiction to modern comfort can turn a flexible human into a fragile piece of glass.
Right. And it all culminated in this passionate, apocalyptic plea for spiritual unification and cosmic adaptability.
The text ultimately demands that you ask yourself, are you resisting the inevitable vibrations of life, or are you resonating with them?
Before we go, there's one final unexplored implication of this text that we want to leave you with today.
Yes, because the author insists that to survive, humanity must function like that symphony orchestra, constantly adjusting our personal frequency to harmonize with the group and with the heavens.
Right, active tuning.
But if you think about the actual mechanics of an orchestra, if every single musician is constantly altering their own pitch just to match the person sitting next to them, the music would dissolve into total chaos.
It would just be a mess of sliding notes.
Exactly. For an orchestra to actually tune, there has to be one source playing a fixed, immovable note. So in this grand cosmic symphony of adaptation, who or what is acting as the conductor, setting the original pitch?
Is the pitch set by the loudest person in the room? Is it set by the environment? Or is it set by heaven itself?
It's a huge question.
It is, and it's something to keep turning over in your mind. Because if this essay is right, every friend you make, every food you hate, and every decision you make for the rest of your life is just a matter of frequency. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.